Hi everybody, welcome to Chapter 5 in our Fullan textbook. We're going to be talking about the transformation process in high schools. This chapter is slightly dated, but it also looks at what I consider to be the most challenging position in education, which is the position of high school principal. I think that people will disagree with me on that, but this is why I said this book is really here to open up eyes and make you think about different perceptions of things. But one of the things that you're going to see is that it's the position in education that's at the forefront. You know who the high school principal is. If you live in the district and you live in the elementary school, you know who the high school principal is. They're the one that's on the news. They're the ones that are at all the extracurricular activities. And they're the person that's the most prominent and prevalent person in the district. Maybe even more so than the superintendent. So I think that it's the toughest, but I also think it's the most important job of any in education. So why do I think it is? I think it is because of notoriety in the community. Like I said, everybody knows who the high school principal is, what their role is, and what their responsibilities are. I think they have to be involved. They have to be out at the school 4 or 5 nights a week with athletics and extracurricular activities. If you are married as a high school principal, your spouse better be very much involved in the doings of the school. If they're not, it's never going to work out because they're going to live at the school. And if there's an emergency at 1 in the morning, they're out of bed and they're at the school. Difficult to have children and be a high school principal. Constant scrutiny in the newspaper. People will publish editorials on high school principals that are positive and negative, and they have complete freedom of the press to do so. Elementary school number 3 of maybe 15 in a district is not going to get the scrutiny that high school principal 1 of 1 will get. They have to know a lot of subject areas. They have to be proficient in at least English and or math. If they're not, that's a problem. Sex. Teachers are going to have sex with other teachers. It's a reality of the position. Teachers are going to have sex with students. It's a reality of the position. Students are going to have sex with students. It's a reality of the position. Think about this at the elementary or middle school level. You might only have teacher-to-teacher sex, but at high school, you're going to have all of these weird, difficult elements to deal with. And any high school principal is going to deal with them at least once. You also have cyberbullying as well. Cyberbullying isn't going away, and whether or not it's being done on campus or off campus is always a problem that high school principals are going to face. So there are challenges at each of the levels. One of the problems that you have at the elementary school, I had somebody last semester who constantly told me, no, being a high school principal is easy, it's being an elementary school principal that's hard. Because the first time they have to tell a parent that their child has a learning disability, it's going to bring them to tears and it's going to bring the parent to tears. Me personally, I will take that over a riot, a fight, a bomb threat, teacher sex, any day of the week. I am not here to tell you to make a judgment, but my belief, nothing is tougher than being a high school principal, and nothing ever will be tougher than being a high school principal, period. Because of that, that's my interpretation, and that's kind of my belief. So this chapter is 10 years old. One of the things that I'm going to say throughout class and I'm going to require on your writings is that the literature that you do must stay current. Fullan kept this chapter in the book because the problems at the high school level have stayed the same over the last 10 years. As you engage this chapter, keep this in mind as you look at the content, and realize that even though this is an older chapter, it's one that you need to consider as well, because it is an older chapter. So, 5 problems with high schools. High schools have problems including fragmentation, insufficient attention to control and programs and services, difficulties in the coherence to the mission. And I think that's important to note when we're talking about high schools, because there is a problem with the mission and understanding it, because you have multiple teachers in multiple subject areas that are doing lots of different things. So that's a problem that's difficult to transform about high schools. Could be a broad but disconnected variety of courses. Think about all the different offerings that social studies teachers do. Some do anthropology, some do geography, some do European history, world history, African history, American history, civics, government. They're connected, but are they really connected? And as you as a principal, can you identify elements of each of them? Quality of teaching and relying on lecture and content without looking for learning mastery of knowledge is huge, because high school teachers have to learn lots of different things. I was a business teacher. I taught entrepreneurship one period, marketing another, law another, computer science another. I taught accounting. I taught speed writing way back in the day. I did that once, and thank God I never have to do that again. But I had to jump from subject to subject to subject to subject to subject, and I'd forget what I was teaching sometimes. That can be a problem, and that can be a challenge. Schools are large and overcrowded. We know that about some of the high schools that we have here. There are students who you're never going to reach and you're never going to touch. I know that there are people that are saying, well, I'm going to reach every student and I'm going to give every student the perfect high school experience. We say that college isn't for everybody. Well, traditional high school isn't for everybody either. Let's cut the crap and start to admit that there are some kids that we're not going to be able to reach in a traditional high school setting. They might perform better in a magnet school. They might perform better in a charter school. The anti-intellectual peer culture is something that I saw teaching and working at Mount Lebanon. There's a girl that I had in class that I remember to this date. Very, very, very intelligent and smart girl, but she was also the captain of the cheerleading team. And for her, it was more important for her to present herself as anti-intellectual than to be intellectual. She could have done computer programming. She could have been a brilliant mind in the field, but she ended up going into public relations and communications simply because that's what her culture wanted her to do, and that's what she thought she had to do to impress guys. And that's going to happen in your high schools. So, how do you fix them? You know, authors will tell you that they can, but I think that they are unfixable problems. And when we're talking about high school in 10 and 15 years, you are not going to be able to fix any of these problems. But I think I can fix one of them. If I said large and overcrowded, and this was an elementary school, we would simply split it. Would say, let's split the elementary school, we're going to split it into an early childhood center and do K1 in one building and 2 through 6 in another. When you try to do that in a high school, you have problems. You have parents who don't want the tree that their grandparent, sat next to underneath by the high school. They want their grandkids to sit next to that same tree. They have a bronze sculpture or a tiger that has names inscribed in it. Does that go to the new school or the old school? Should the kids go there? Stuff like that doesn't work at high school, and that's a problem and that's a challenge. So Nagara says, look at charter schools. Look at what they're doing and translate it to large public schools. We could have a magnet school within the district where students have to qualify to be admitted. We could make sure that all samples are stratified by gender or race, that there's an actual parallel between gender and race at the school level based on demographic population. I like this idea, but could we do this in some districts, or would there be pushback and kickback? So anytime we talk about high school, no matter what you say, you have to talk about high stakes testing. It's there, it exists, and it's going to be that way. Schools will take shortcuts on teaching to improve test scores. What they'll do is they'll hire new teachers or new assistant principals. They can restructure the building. They can create the 9th grade academy, and then the school gets a couple-year exception to reform the tests. They can try strategies, but the testing isn't going to go away. It's still going to be there, and it has to be acknowledged. So are we testing to death? Part of the work that I'm doing with succession planning, I looked at a bunch of counties in Florida. One of the ones that's most commonly in the news is Seminole County, and it is in Central Florida. Seminole County is unique because they are going against what the State Department of Education in Florida is saying. They found that standardized testing occurred in some form, K-12, 50 out of 180 school days in their district. So they started going against it and not going with the tests anymore. Their complaint and the reason was that Florida used computer testing to speed up data efficiency, meaning that after the tests were taken, feedback was given almost instantaneously to the students and to the teachers. That's a good thing, but they didn't have the capacity in order to account for these testing. Think about it. It would be great if we could put all of our 3rd graders on tests to take their Oklahoma State exams. But, what happens if the computer crashed for a 3rd grader and they're already anxious about this test in the first place? Differences between adult learners and student learners. Big consideration here. I said this before, but one of the books I would have used for this class is called Collateral Damage. I didn't have choice, so I didn't use this book. But it digs into the notion of over-testing and the impact that over-testing has on students. If you are looking at evaluation and testing as a dissertation topic, this should be the first resource that you look at. Go and find Collateral Damage, read it, look at it, and find what it can do for you as a dissertation, as a book for a main source for a dissertation topic. So, high school reform, you're going to have to look at size, because size does matter. Noguera suggests that we have smaller learning communities to connect students to teachers and hit all cylinders. I can't tell you where it's going right in all districts, but I can tell you one that I know that's working. Skiatook High School is one that it is working at. They are doing student-to-teacher connection in small learning communities, making sure that every student in the building is accounted for, and at least one teacher is responsible for checking in on them. It doesn't matter if they're a top performer or a low performer, they're integrating this into their professional learning community work. It is a great model, and it's working for them, but they are also a smaller high school. They can do it. They have the capacity to do it. Some high schools may not. So, Oklahoma is doing two things that I support and love that are sexy in education right now. They're doing Freshman Academy concept and the 5-6 Intermediate Center. When you're thinking about high school reform, I would strongly encourage you to think about that Freshman Academy concept, because we might not be able to reduce the size of the high school, but we could take out all the freshmen and put them in a different building. Then the sophomores, juniors, and seniors have more space. The freshmen are going to be taking core classes anyway. So we've given more choice to the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. They can track to go to vocational ed, potentially a magnet school, and then the freshmen are getting their own experience, and they're using the traditional academy approach that we've talked about in our undergraduate and other graduate courses in education. So Noguera talks about connected charter schools with theming. I think that's important. If you're going to have charter schools, they need to have theming. But you have to ask yourself, can you implement this in your school? What could you do to, what would the cost associated with charter schools, with the charter schools or a magnet school in your district be? Would it hurt? Would it help? How would you have to restructure, and would it be worth it in the long run? I'm taking this from a finance perspective. It's a great idea, but could you afford it? And what would you create? That's one of the questions that I would ask you in a face-to-face course. What would you create? If I said create a model, create 3 different high schools, what would those high schools do and what would they look like? So, Noguera's last message is student engagement. He says the most important people that can tell you how high school should look is the students. If you're in district leadership roles, how do you take student input and look at it? And how do you do it effectively? That's something that I want you to really think about. So, there's a lot to think about in this chapter, and I realize that some of you are planning on going into central administration and others aren't. But if you are planning on ascending to the superintendency eventually, you need to think about high school reform. I think it's one of the most important concepts there are. We're going to look at the role of the principal in the next chapter and how the principal themselves is a stakeholder and how they contribute to change. If you have any questions, please let me know, but I think there's definitely a lot to think about with this chapter. Thank you.